Hey Billy, let's get into it. So I'm sure that you know what the literary canon is, Billy, but just for anyone else in the room who might not be as familiar, I'm gonna explain it a little bit. So the literary canon is a body of work that is considered essential reading. Basically, the literary canon is what is taught at a literary level. At a collegiate literary level, we call it the literary canon. It also extends into the high school canon. What are teachers teaching high school students, and why are they teaching those books to high school students? And so the literary canon is like a benchmark for measuring literary quality. Now, how has the literary canon been changing and evolving over the past few years? There have been different literary theories, literary criticisms have come out, and even like different ways of reading have emerged from this change in the literary canon. Why are we still reading all of the same books, and how are we going to change the representation needed in literature? Some scholars have created this kind of foundational work in order for new authors who are not the white male, especially in this article. I know, cited source, isn't that fun? The author claims that the Native American Renaissance does not capture adequately the abilities of Native American writers, and he begs for writers to go into more speculative fiction, go into more sort of genre-bending kind of styles, because he feels that the Native American literature that is being represented is not an overall connection to the rest of Native American literature as a whole. And he hopes for us to recapture what it means to be a Native American writer. The literary canon is often comparing minority voices to that of other writers in the canon. And often those writers in the canon were white men who had been studied for decades up until this point. New historic literary criticism emphasizes both the historical context with which the author has written the novel and the contemporary context with which the reader is reading the novel. And so it outlines this the culture of the historical context and the culture of the contemporary context clash, and how do contemporary readers react to it. So my question is, or I should say, one of many, is it a reaction to this call for more diverse literatures? Or is Jones getting into the canon a testament to his writing skill and abilities? It wasn't until The Only Good Indians in 2020 that Stephan Graham Jones really began to gain recognition. His name became popular within the canon, and The Only Good Indians put his name on the map as a forerunner in horror. I would also like to mention here, Stephan Graham Jones mentions in an interview about this middle trilogy kind of thing. I'll put the screenshot on the screen. But I just want you to know that I've had this same theory, Billy. I've had this same theory. The second book in a trilogy is always the worst one, or the most boring, and I've just had this theory for years. Every time my friends have been like, no, Hannah, what about Catching Fire? And Bryn, Catching Fire sets up Mockingjay. It's the most boring of the three books, although I agree. I like the storyline. If Katniss had known, it wouldn't be second book syndrome, but because she did, anyway, cut that out. Was The Only Good Indians easily accepted into literary canon? Short answer, no. Long answer, yes, but we have all of these different kind of ways of looking at literary writing. And while I believe that the definition of the canon tells us that once a book is taught, it immediately kind of enters into the canon, and Billy, you've been teaching this class now for about 10 weeks, so you've got to know by now that he is a literary scholar, which you have implored on us, your students. You're welcome. I learned something in your class, haha. So, are there still critics that claim that The Only Good Indians cannot be inherently scholarly? Why, yes, Billy, there are. And I argue, does a book need to be inherently scholarly to be considered canon? Who knows? I would actually argue that Jones is up to par with these great literary scholars that we know, even though there are a few scholars who have some problem with Jones's work being in literary canon. I believe that the work that was done by the scholars who demanded new stuff, who demanded new voices, who demanded new takes on literature, really paved the way for writers like Jones to be accepted into the canon. Is it the work of past literary critics, or is it the work of Jones's writing? And fun fact, I think it's both. As you've said, Billy, Jones had a small dedicated fan base when he published most of his books, you included. Jones had put enough work into his novels at this point that he had become incredibly well known throughout his community, and his readers would recognize his different themes, motifs, settings, characters, all things that are present throughout different novels, which I actually remember talking about with Jones himself when he came to our class. And I don't really know if I should say this, but in this political climate, it makes sense that people would relate to and have some serious connection to a deep horror psychological thriller. Anyway, human connection happens all throughout Jones's novels, especially The Only Good Indian, often comparing it to authors who are already in the canon, like McCarthy, McMurdy, and Kilton. So I know I kind of insinuated earlier, but about comparing minority writers to that of the white predominant male perspective. And I know that I just listed 3 white predominantly male authors. Know that I see the irony in that. And also know that while it is kind of tricky to avoid it, I was more meaning in the context of, oh, I'm not going to read this Native American author, or this Indigenous author, or this African American author, or this Mexican author, or this what, insert blank here. I meant it in the context of, I'm not going to read this certain people group's literature because I have the white person's literature, and this literature is inherently better. See, that's where the problem comes to lie. Comparing and contrasting authors is unfortunately how the canon works, and how it continues to grow and continue to evolve through this kind of lesson of, well, here's what we considered great before, here's what we're comparing it to now, and here are contemporary authors that we can compare with. The literary canon is a game of comparison that I am unable to escape from. Out of all of the things that I've already listed for The Only Good Indians to even be considered canon, comparing it to other classics, which I know we do in the canon now. So Billy, why is it literary? Why have you, a scholar, decided to really go into Stephan Graham Jones? Why have you decided to study Jones? Now I'm really asking, like, why truly have you decided to become the leading scholar on Stephan Graham Jones? And if you've wandered your way over to the wrong corner of the internet and clicked on a Stephan Graham Jones video because you've seen about his books, you've heard a couple things, why are you sitting and listening to me talk about the literary canon? Why do we care? Who is the literary canon even for? Why are scholars working to pave a path for unheard voices? The complexity of Jones's characters and his dialogue is what is drawing scholars towards his work. The pacing of The Only Good Indians forced readers to become close with characters and quickly move away from them as they follow them through their gruesome demises. And the setting throughout The Only Good Indians and other novels that Jones have written is consistent often throughout all of his books and short stories, only a few taking place in different places like Mongrels and the one about the gas station and the Texas one. But from what I know, the majority of his books do take place in Western America, Montana, Colorado, kind of that mountainous region. Since his books all take place in real places in America, readers are able to connect even deeper, especially American readers, because of the connectivity they have to the place that his stories are taking place. His work is popular both amongst scholars and amongst the everyday reader. There are reviews about Jones's work from an everyday casual reader's kind of point of view There's also reviews coming out from the scholarly end, including yours, Billy, that kind of start to bring Jones's work into the canon as well. And it's clear in the reviews how Jones's work are being linked to casual readers and to the literary canon. To conclude, human connectivity really defines literature. And that's why Jones has been accepted into the canon, because scholars like you, Billy, have paved the way. His outstanding work that he does in such a short amount of time, if we're being quite frank, Jones is the exact voice that people were looking for when they were calling on people to define the literary canon in a new way, because he's really taken this genre of speculative fiction and horror writing and brought the literary canon down to their level as he would want, I think. And he really allows us to redefine what we think of as literary, in the sense of his books create this kind of casual relationship between author and reader. And not only that, but Jones's books have been made accessible to anyone. Jones's audience is not scholarly. And while a lot of the books that are in the literary canon are not necessarily scholarly, a lot of people do find them to be a little bit harder to read, a little bit harder to sit through. Which I can't blame them. The worst book I've ever read in my life has technically been a part of the literary canon. Not only is he really doing work within the genre to redefine what we consider literary, having seen Jones's growth, it's not surprising to me that he is going to probably be considered in the literary canon, especially as we get further and further away from his most recent publications. As more work continues to come out on Jones, which I'm confident it will, because I found the sources that I did, which admittedly were very few, but the fact that I found the sources that I did proves that people are already starting to kind of take Jones into the conversation. So, Billy, I hope you've enjoyed my video essay. I hope it was up to par. Hit subscribe if you want. Maybe I'll post another one. We'll see. Bye.